appointment with the 1 Hour of Europe series of webinars organized by Antonio Brassel's office. We are still waiting a while as we wait the participants to connect. We see the number is increasing, so we will start in few seconds, just the time to finalize the attendance that normally grows in any case during the event. I am Massimo Bosuoli. I am the director of NTNU office in Brussels. NTNU being the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, currently the largest Norwegian university with 7,800 employees and 42,000 students, being active and focused on areas like science and technology, but also social science, humanities, and economy side. So we are a multidisciplinary university. Today, the event will be about the recently issued Strategic Foresight report from the European Commission, and we have the honor and the pleasure to have with us Juraj Nociar, the head of cabinet of the European Commission Vice President Maroš Šefčovič, which is responsible for the interinstitutional relations and foresight. So Juraj, welcome to 1 Hour with Europe. To remind you, we are starting with a presentation from Juraj that will last 25-30 minutes, highlighting the main aspects and composition and indications that the Strategic Foresight report gives to the European system to understand what are the challenges, but what are also the possible solutions and approaches that we can uptake to handle the challenges that Europe will have to live in the next period. And after it, we are going to open the floor for your questions and answers. Remember that the rule is that you write your name in the Q&A chat, and you will be given the possibility to open your microphone and camera and pose yourself the question like in a normal conference. So I wish you a good and enjoyable 1 Hour with Europe appointment. And Juraj, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Massimo, for your kind words and inviting me here to be with you. And also for thank you for choosing the topic of foresight or strategic foresight. Well, if you allow me, I would like to combine my introductory remarks with a PowerPoint presentation, because I think it's always better to see the pictures and combine with words, that this can be maybe better for you also to understand and maybe also to remember something from this. Maybe I can say that foresight is not something totally new in European Commission. We are busy and we are doing the foresight since 2012. But this is the first time that foresight got the political, let's say, stamp, and it's part of portfolio of European Commission Vice President. And what is even more important, that strategic foresight became part of really our policy making. Maybe we can move to the next slide. You can see the difference between foresight and strategic foresight, and this is really important element that what we have now, that really we are not only looking to the future and trying to let's say put attention to things which can influence the negative development in the future. But foresight has become really part of our better regulation system. You know, better regulation is the system how the EU legislation is put in place. And now just saying in a very short, that each impact assessment, so when the legislative proposal is put on the table for discussion in the Commission, it has to be accompanied by impact assessment. And part of the impact assessment has to be also foresight exercise, because we need to check if the legislation which is proposed is really waterproofed concerning the potential danger and potential negative development which can influence the European Union. Next, please. Let me say a few words about the first Strategic Foresight report, which was done last year. I think it was not as a surprise that we have chosen as a topic resilience, because it was basically a few months after start of pandemics, and we recognize that besides the fact that European Union and all the member states considered us as really able to deal with whichever crisis, suddenly we recognize that we had difficulties to have enough masks. We have difficulties even to have the simple medicaments, like, for example, paracetamol. And we found out that we are really not able to deal with these things, because just paracetamol was imported 100% from India, and main components India was importing from China. So there are really set of different indicators that we need to change our philosophy. We need to focus on resilience and need to do something, improve it. Next, please. Well, in general, when we look at the foresight, foresighters always speak about megatrends. In Europe, we speak mostly about 14 megatrends. Megatrends are mostly the aspects which are influencing our life, if I may put it in very simple terms. You can see from the PowerPoint that we divided them into two categories of megatrends. And this is related to COVID, because COVID, some of these megatrends was accelerating, and some of them are either COVID is neutral or decelerate the let's say development or impact of these aspects on the real life. So more or less, foresighters are busy and are dealing mostly with these 14 megatrends. The next slide, please. For this year's Strategic Foresight report, we dig a bit deeper on geopolitical dimension of resilience, because as I mentioned, for example, the paracetamol case, this is a typical example that we were not able to act independently, and we were not autonomous. We were dependent on somebody else, and this could potentially, or this can in general potentially, has really even fatal consequences on life of people or economic development, prosperity, and so on and so forth in European Union. Therefore, we started to discuss about open strategic autonomy. Open because we do not want to build a kind of Chinese wall that we are closed and do not want to communicate with the third world. But at the same time, we want to be autonomous. So basically, it's about a situation that we want to be able to take actions. We want to be able to take decisions. And since the European Union is a geopolitical player, so we want to do it in such a way that we are really not dependent on third countries. Of course, speaking about Strategic Foresight report would be very difficult to analyze all 14 megatrends. Therefore, we focused on 4 most important megatrends, which are important on European Union developments and which are, as we see, which should, in our view, put shape EU's future towards 2050. Why 2050? The reason is very simple. Foresight doesn't deal with near future. Foresight deals with, let's say, horizon 15, 20, and more years, because which is near future. This is not foresight. This is basically more or less the current situation. So we have chosen 4 structural global trends. And based on analysis, we then came to the conclusion and the suggestion that there are 10 areas where we should act in order to strengthen our capacity and freedom to act. Next slide, please. So let's look at those 4. I think the first 2, climate and digital, is nothing surprising for you, because you know that climate and digital, those are the main priorities for the European Union. So it was very natural that we have chosen those. And also just when I simplify, of course, what we see nowadays is the situation that we see during the summer, for example, extreme weather. We see the fires, we see, and on the other side, the areas very scarcity of water. Concerning the digital, well, even the COVID has substantially changed the situation that I think 2 years ago, nobody would predict that such an event like today would take place in a virtual area. And we take it nowadays like something very natural, that we organize several video conferences per day, maybe no physical meeting at all. International conferences are taking place in virtual space. But at the same time, it's not only this area, but we see that what is also happening also in the area of artificial intelligence, automation, and so on and so forth. So those are two areas. Then we have chosen as a third element, it's the pressure on democracy and values. And this is a very interesting thing, that when we did a bit digging in this area, we found out that 34% of global population live in the countries where democracy is deteriorating. Unfortunately, I have to say that when we count this 34%, it's also EU member states. You know that some of the EU member states are also considered as countries where the democracy is deteriorating. At the same time, when we look at in which countries, in which regions there is improving democracy, it's only 4% of population is living in the areas where the democracy is improving. So this is really something very worrying. And since for us as a EU, democracy, values, rule of law are really the core of, let's say, our existence, and what was the basis of establishment of European Union. This was the reason why we put this megatrend and as important element for our not only analysis but also potential acting for the future. And last but not least is shift in the global order and democracy. And we see what is happening, that there is aging of population in some areas of the world, decreasing of population, at the same time other part of the world where the population is increasing. So just one comparison, that we expect that, for example, India in 20 years will have a bigger economy than the European Union. So this is something which is changing the global order. And also countries which have been a couple of years ago not important concerning the voice on the international scene, now they are getting more and more important. Next, please. And one additional comparison concerning these global trends, and you see the comparison of GDP, that emerging 7, so Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, and Turkey, it seems that they will shift from 2/3 of the weight of G7 countries, and they will surpass them by 1.5 times in the next 20 years. And we see what is happening with DGP of EU from 1990 to 2050, that it will be even India will be stronger. Of course, the strongest should be or it seems to be China. US will still keep to be quite strong, but we are losing in this this comparison. This trend and this indication also brought us to the discussion about importance of GDP as a most important element for evaluation of, let's say, standard of living and wealth of the countries. Because I think no need to say that I think it's difficult to expect that in 2050 that, for example, India will have a higher standard of living than the European Union. That I think it's not possible to expect. So we need to think beyond GDP, and this is also something new, which is happening during this period of time, that foresighters, economists are discussing more and more how to develop something else, not only GDP, or not having only GDP as a main element for evaluation. Next slide, please. Coming to 10 most important areas where we should act. Well, I will just comment very briefly. So we see most important we identify for the time being health and food system. Well, at the same time, it's not like most important, because those 10 areas which I will mention now are areas which we consider as the most important to act. So it doesn't mean that number one is really the most important, but nowadays it's as a matter of fact that really health and food systems, because what can be more important than health? So this has been identified as something extremely important, because health, of course, related also to COVID and other diseases, food also as related to climate change, that there will be areas involved, but also in the EU, which will be not anymore suitable, for example, for production of food. Second, decarbonization, affordable energy. Of course, we need to decarbonize, and production and generation of energy will be the very important element. And of course, renewable energy, how we develop the new technologies in this regard will be extremely important. Data management, artificial intelligence, well, this is of course another important part of the story, where we can expect amazing changes. Just maybe one comparison, that currently we have approximately 30 billion devices connected to internet. We expect that by 2030 it will be 200 billion devices connected to internet. That is the reason why this is extremely important area. Critical raw materials and diversification of supply. I can mention one example we are dealing with. These are the batteries for electromobility, for electric vehicles. When we launched the initiative of European Battery Alliance in 2017, it was in the beginning kind of hesitation that why we should try to produce batteries for electric vehicles in Europe. We can import these batteries from China or Korea or somewhere from the East, and no need to be bothered with that. But then suddenly, a year later, when we discussed with car manufacturers, they told us, look, we are really interested, because when we wanted to renew the contract with Chinese after 2024, we got answer that no batteries to Europe, because they want to export electric cars to Europe. And that was the ring bell for our car manufacturers that we have to do something. So we launched the initiative. It was really huge support, huge interest. But then if you want to produce the batteries, you immediately start digging where I can get lithium from, when I get other materials, and you immediately recognize that all processing of cobalt 100% is done in China. All processing of manganese is done in China. And so on and so forth. Majority of mines are owned by Chinese. So it was just as a result that it's a pity that we didn't do the foresight maybe 20 years ago, because apparently Chinese did, and that was the result of their activities, that since last 15 years they have been buying all mines in third world, like in particular South America and Africa, and now they are controlling the main sources of raw materials. And this is not only needed, these raw materials, only for electromobility, but we need raw materials and rare earths also for photovoltaics and any other activities and production. Yeah, so all other materials and devices which are needed for let's say decarbonization of our economy and our society. Therefore, is needed also this area of critical raw materials. Global position in standard setting. One example, you know, when in 2000, beginning of this century, the mobile telephony started. It was, you know, maybe you know that two standards, one American, one European, and it was kind of competition. But then it was first time ever that the EU set up the standard for mobile telephony, and suddenly it became the worldwide standard. And that was a typical example of advantage if we take the first move, because we set a standard which was close to our interest, our producers, and then others had to adjust. And this is what we want to do. For example, now I mentioned the electromobility and the batteries. We have now the legislation which is in discussion in Council and European Parliament, and part of this exercise is also setting the standards which will become worldwide standards for production of batteries, recycling of batteries, performance of batteries. So it will be in our interest that this is what will be produced in Europe, but at the same time, we want to set the standards concerning environmental standards. We want to set standards concerning security and also other elements. Next, please. Then we have proof of economic and financial system. Well, I can say that, for example, when we speak about decarbonization and famous Fit for 55, it's really necessary to have something like additional 400 billion euros per year of investment into economy in order to fit to this standard. So we need to have also our financial institutions ready for these challenges. And I again can use an example from this European Battery Alliance exercise we did recently, that, for example, based on our experience, European Investment Bank changed the way of providing the loans to companies. That was the company I can mention, Northvolt in Sweden. That was the first, let's say, new way how European Investment Bank provided the loan for a company which is doing business in this area and also doing business in, let's say, something totally new, unknown, because that was not typical let's say, in European Union. Similarly, is concerning what was mentioned, the raw materials, that, you know, speaking about mining in EU, it's still some cautiousness that why do we want to support mining? It's not what we want to support, but of course, now mining is not only about coal mining, but we speak nowadays in particular about mining of rare earths or those raw materials which are extremely needed. So this is the reason why we need to change the financial systems. We need to change the policy for financing, because this is important that we support financially also mining, for example, but once again, not mining of coal. Skills and talent matching, it goes together with all these activities, because we speak that while renewable energies and decarbonization will bring millions of new jobs. Yes, that's true. But For this, we need new qualifications, new skills. Again, I will use the example from our Battery Alliance that during recent months, we have concluded several memorandum of understanding, for example, in Spain, in France, and now other countries will follow, which are part of European Battery Alliance. That, for example, in Spain, it was concluded memorandum of understanding that the Commission will help financially to requalify more than 160,000 people, because there is a need to change the profile of these people, because just electromobility and the battery production, there are professions which so far nobody was doing the training of people in this area. Number 7, strengthening security, defense capacities, access to space. Yes, of course, if you want to be global player, we need to be able to be absolutely sure that we can assure security, we have enough defense capacities, and access to space. We need to be able to be totally independent to get there, because it's not only about monitoring, but that space is now also about communication and many other activities which are out there. Partners to promote peace, security, prosperity. Well, that this is again one of major elements, together with democracy and human rights, that we want to support these areas worldwide. So of course, this is important that we, as a global partners, we need to build coalitions with key players like, in particular, United States, and of course, other third countries. And also we need to keep dialogue and to continue discussion also with other third countries. Resilience of institutions, this is maybe a bit unusual element, but it's very visible now during the COVID crisis that the basis for stability in the member states is, and in the countries in general, is the stability of administration. So if the institutions are stable, if are able to act, if are able to take even bold decisions, there is the possibility also to be resilient and to take decisions which, as we say, which are autonomous. Part of this resilience is also what I mentioned, the thinking beyond the GDP, because this is part of this exercise, and also something new which have been developing, and it will be formally presented and introduced the next Monday. And it's basically the development of resilience dashboards. That was the exercise when we started with it last year during the preparation of our foresight report. We can maybe go to the next, and just to understand maybe better what is it about. That we want to go to evaluation of those elements which are not saying and reflecting the current situation, but they will be reflecting and answering that if the sector or the country or Europe is able to deal with potential future difficulties. Next one, please. And this is as an example that how it looks like the draft resilient dashboard. When we presented it as a draft a year ago, it was immediately taken by the member states that they are interested, because it's not about putting that which country is the best and which is the worst, but it's kind of, let's say, mirror to member states that what is the situation in specific areas. If you can move on, because this is very detailed. Then, of course, we can put this specific indicators to kind of synthetic resilience index. So you can see a bit more synthetic. We can go to the next one, which is the global resilient. And we do the comparison also between the third countries and the EU or specific member states. What is the situation? So the blue one, the dark blue is the best, and the yellow is the worst. another one. So this is the full global, so it's even more synthetic dashboard. So this is something which is taken in with a great interest of many member states. Luxembourg already took it to the official, let's say, work of Ministry of Finance, doing the work on strengthening resilience, and also European Commission will be taken the resilient dashboard as part of exercise for European semester for the next year. Next one, please. So what are the next steps concerning strategic agenda? I mentioned the mega trends. Well, this is the standard, but we developed because of in particular now the COVID and also the recent exercise, like for example the change in energy prices. So we found out that also one specific tool which is used for foresight, and this is horizon scanning, is very important, and therefore we want to build also capacity inside the Commission for horizon scanning. So more or less there should be a team of people who would be just checking what is happening, what is trending on, for example, even on the social media, and what are the trends, and because usually those are the elements which are important and are telling what is happening. One example concerning, for example, the migration crisis in 2015, that it was already in 2013, those who are checking what is happening on the traffic on internet recognize that in north of Africa and Middle East, it was a substantial increase of the traffic and increase of interest how to get to Europe, what are the rules to ask for asylum and all this search. It was a really dramatic increase, but nobody paid attention to this. It was just taken as an interesting phenomenon which is there, but we saw that what was the consequence. And of course, we will continue in integrating resilience dashboard in the Commission toolbox. As I said, that it will be part of European semester evaluation, and of course we will also continue working on GDP or beyond GDP and well-being framework. And since green and digital are still on the top of the agenda of the EU, we have chosen green and digital as a twinning activities, but focus on emerging technologies in those two areas as a topic for the next year strategic foresight report. So that was briefly about activities about foresight, and well, if you have some questions, I can try to provide you with some answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juraj, for this very interesting outline of the current considerations that we can find in the strategic report, which I have to say I read with a lot of interest, because I found a lot of elements of inspiration inside it. And of course, while the colleagues which are connected think about the questions, and I again invite the people to just write your name in the Q&A chat, and we will call you to intervene. So be ready to open your camera and the microphone. I see some questions are already arriving. Let me have the privilege, as I am the moderator, to put you the first question, which is basically one thing that needs my attention in the report is related to the fact that it is still highlighting the fact that Europe is a lot on the forefront of Europe being of the world in terms of capability of producing knowledge. No, the report says that we are still on the 20%, but even if we have to say the policy of the Commission since the last 3 framework program has been really focused improving our capability to develop innovation, we are still lagging behind some countries like, I noted them out, which are basically the typical ones, Japan, South Korea, USA, and China, while we are somehow recovering the gap with other big players like Australia, for example. So, how do you interpret this? I mean, we are really putting a lot of effort in trying to valorize our knowledge. The research institutes and the universities themselves are really putting a lot of investment and knowledge resources in trying to transform the result of knowledge into innovation. Do you see this to happen once or later, or we are still struggling and we need to put some effort on the table more on our side?
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. This is a very interesting and important question, and I would say that we need to do it, because if we want to be also for the future a relevant player, and of course we want to be a relevant global player, we need to adjust to the reality. Because I think that what was happening, let's say 10 years ago, I remember, because I am kind of doyen in head of cabinet, and I was head of cabinet in 2010. And I remember that period of time, industrial policy was something which was not considered as very important, because we thought that mining raw materials is not for us, industrial production it's not for us, and we are basically the area, we are the countries where we have to develop services, in particular financial services, and that will assure the wealth, standard of living, and respect worldwide. And now we see that maybe that period of time it was very natural, but now we see that what has changed, and the countries which are controlling resources, which are controlling now, look at chip production, that nobody was thinking, and nobody some years ago, that we should be really a bit more, pay more attention to this area. And suddenly we recognize that we are not able to assure the continuous production of cars, continuous production of IT equipment, or whatever, heating boilers, because even chip is necessary for this element, and we need to change it. Similarly, I mentioned the new skills. So this is something which is necessary to change. What I can say that European Commission is really adjusting quite quickly to the new realities. Like I mentioned, the chip production. So it was a week or 2 weeks ago that the Commission approved the strategy that we will come with a new legislation concerning the chip production. We are changing even our competition policy, that when it comes to technologies, like for example, chip production, it will be able even to give the state aid to support the production of not only something which is not known at all, but even the standard production of chips, because we need to have this production also in Europe. And in this kind, for example, when we compare, again, I will use the example of batteries, because that was also that we used the state aid, so-called framework of important project of common European interest, IPCEI, so-called, for battery production. But we spoke about billions of euros. But speaking about chip production, it's necessary to speak about hundreds of billions of euros.
Almost 3.
So this is really very difficult to expect that would be possible for some startup to start production of chips. We can forget, this is just not possible.
Yeah.
And there's a curiosity that we are best in the world in development and producing the machines, the robots which are producing the chips, but we are not able to produce the chips. This is a curiosity. And all this is not only about production of machines, but we need to have the people who will be doing this. So now, as a curiosity, that the new things which are happening, for example, also in production of batteries, these battery cells, the real production is in the launch of the production done in such a way that European employees have the camera, and what they are doing, they just doing under the supervision of Asians. They are watching online and they are telling, no, you have to do this, you have to do this and that. So really we need change our attitude, our training, and this is important, I think, and the importance of foresight is that we need to see what is happening, what are the new trends, and what is important for us. For example, I didn't mention in this digital area the blockchain, which is new phenomenon. Just a couple of days ago, I met the director for Europe of a company which is called Binance. I never have heard about this company. Yesterday in Financial Times, it was an article about this company. Last week, they have one day, they have turnover of this company was 179 billion US dollars. Company we never heard.
They boom. Yeah.
They even don't have a headquarters. This company has no headquarters. It's like virtual company, and now they are establishing the headquarters. And these are the new trends which just we need to understand. We need to keep an eye on it. And of course, what is important, we need to put certain framework and certain, I do not want to say regulation, but also regulation in this area, in order to put it in order. And of course, it has to be in such a way that we have something out of this, that we are not just following that, this is happening, this is important, but it's in either China or Japan or US, and we have nothing out of it.
Yeah. While my colleagues are opening the camera for the first question from, let me see the name, we don't have the name, open it Sunday, from Joe Peroit. So Joe, be ready to ask your question. I have an extra question regarding the batteries, which is one of my first row, especially raw materials. Currently, Europe is making a huge investment, as you already somehow told, in battery production. Norway itself is currently establishing 4 different production plants in the country with specific agreements with important companies that have decided to make investment in Norway to build these 4 production sites. But as you also mentioned, the raw materials to produce batteries are not owned by Europe. So on one side, I myself as a man on the street asking, okay, we are now producing batteries, still remaining dependent from the suppliers of the raw materials that are necessary to produce batteries. So aren't we just simply, how can I say, postponing the problem to some extent? Because, okay, you said we are producing batteries because someone were telling us, no, you're not going to have batteries, you're going to have electric cars. So we need to be independent in the capability to produce batteries. But suddenly we will be dependent in the materials to produce batteries. So the raw material strategy that was launched in 2007, somehow, is it still in place? Is it still somehow impacting on our capability to become a little bit more independent in the capability to have raw materials? What is the situation?
It's a dramatic change also in the raw material strategy. And as we have European Battery Alliance, we have also European Raw Material Alliance. Suddenly, when we digged a bit deeper, we found out that we have quite a lot of raw materials in Europe, but nothing was done with it. Of course, it's not easy to open new mines in European Union. You can imagine that, of course, the density of population is much higher in comparison with US or with some other countries. Nevertheless, we have quite a lot of raw materials. So there is in several countries, there are projects which are now under, let's say, development. This is like Portugal, Spain, Finland, Czech Republic, France, there is really quite a few projects which are ongoing. In addition, because we are working on the whole value chain, so from mining to processing, because it would be also not very efficient to mine something in Europe, then move it to China for processing and moving back to Europe, and then
also not very green.
Yeah, also not very green. So in parallel, there are several projects also for processing facilities for these raw materials, and then of course also the production as such. So we are changing this strategy. Part of the strategy is also to start the partnership with countries which are close to us. So we have already signed memorandum of understanding with Ukraine. We are working on memorandum of understanding with Serbia. Both countries having really a lot of raw materials and exactly those materials which are needed for our transformation. And part of our general policy is that each and every new free trade agreement with third country, like for example, now it was finalized the free trade agreement with Chile. There is a provision that the third country cannot prevent activities related to raw materials. So they cannot tell us, no, your companies are not allowed to do any activities in this area. It has to be the provision that is part of the agreement. Okay. So this is I would say, the global change of our attitude concerning raw materials.
That's very relieving to know, if I may say. So you have, okay, left us. Then Pier Francesco, you are already allowed to talk. So if you can open your camera and microphone and pose your question directly, you're online. Just open your microphone.
Yes. Thank you, Massimo, and thank you for the presentation of the speaker. That is very interesting. And as I wrote just a few minutes ago on the chat, my question is based on an assumption that is scientifically proven, that we are living in a planet that has a socioeconomic political scenario that is complex. So mainly the complexity implies that we cannot control or predict in the long term the evolution of this complex system. So my question is this one. When the Commission identifies the 4 mega trends and the toolbox mainly is trying to linearize, is trying to adopt a foresight, so the adaptive strategy, why the Commission is not fixing a scenario that we like and then backcasting? So mainly instead of try to adapt continuously to the changes that mainly the main drivers also can act, we fix our objectives and we go towards those one. And an example that already Massimo referred on raw materials, on critical raw materials. If we fix the timescales in 2050 and we go back because we are in 2020, 30 years ago, lithium was not a critical raw materials. So why don't we think about to change completely the approach and to think about to develop materials that will not need this kind of materials that we don't have? So mainly to fund new technologies that are completely independent from those that are linked to geopolitical frictions or possible evolutions that we cannot control. So my provocative question is that why Europe is taking an adaptive strategy, it implies that mainly we're weak.
Thank you, Pier Francesco. So Pier Francesco is proposing to adopt a German approach. Let's fix an objective and go there. So what is your reaction?
You know, it's difficult to say that we don't. Thank you very much for this question. Yeah, it's very interesting. And maybe I will first mention that these 4 megatrends, it doesn't mean that we have chosen those 4 and others are not important and they will not play a role. No, this is definitely not the case. But in the process of foresight, it was, you know, this is a scientific work that we have a joint research center, which is in the lead in this process. So they had internal work, internal discussions. They had several rounds of discussion with foresighters, scientists from outside. And then it was just, I would say, refined, and those 4 have been taken because, you know, for this commission as a basic policy priorities are green and digital. So of course, those 2 are as a basis. So we cannot say that something else is more important than green and digital. These are most important, and then others are other elements are added. Concerning the targets, you know, well, for us the aim is that we want to stay as global player in 2050. This is our target. So we do not want to say that what should be neither GDP nor, I don't know, number of whatever connections, these things, but we want to stay as a global player. And since we see that what is happening with China, India, other emerging economies, we see what is happening in the area of digital, which was just mentioned. So we need to take such a measures that we will reflect this development. Of course, it's not so easy to predict, and foresight is not about predicting the future, just about saying that what are the trends, and if we want to deal with these trends, we need to adjust current situation in order to be able to reflect the future. So that is the reason that we didn't say that what is the concrete target. As I'm saying, concrete target is that we want to stay and remain as a global player. And if we do not adjust, we just will be not interesting. Maybe still standard of living will be important, but also as a geopolitically, nobody would pay attention to European Union. So this is the reason why we need to take action and adjust.
Yeah. And while we are opening for the next question, which is Shira Menoni, I would like to ask you another thing. I mean, one of the worrying figures that you have put on the table is the fact that the GDP of Europe, so the richness of Europe, is going to be shrinked a lot up to 2050.
Yeah, but you know, it's just relative shrinking of GDP.
Because the world is becoming more rich.
This is the point, that GDP of India and China will be really increasing exponentially. And this is the reason why we will be not, of course, doing this exponential.
So this number means that the share of Europe will decrease, but our amount of richness will probably more or less remain the same.
This is okay. We do not expect that we will be poorer. No, not at all. And also, this is the reason why we are now working and thinking and discussing that let's develop something else, because it will be very curious to say that, let's say in 20 years, that the most developed country in the world is China and India. Because that could create the impression that standard of living in China and India is much better than in EU and US. And this is not true. It's not the reality.
Yeah.
So we need to have some other, let's say, indexes or some other ways how to measure the welfare, how to measure the development, and how to measure what we want to be measured and what is considered as important for standard of living, development, and so on and so forth. So that not only let's say the financial reflection of strength of economy.
That's very interesting. If you can introduce yourself, name and affiliation, Shira, and then put your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. My name is Shira Menoni. I am now a seconded national expert at RTD at the Unity SAM. I am originally from Italy, a professor at the university. And my question goes a little bit builds on the previous one, actually, by Pier Francesco Moretti. Because looking at trends, what about if you have external shocks that may dramatically change the configuration of the situation? And I'm not thinking only about the pandemic that still proved to be a significant shock, but also shocks that we have experienced like in the past, like the volcanic eruption that stopped flights over Europe and the Northern Hemisphere for 1 week. So do you believe that by understanding underlying trends, the shocks are actually only an accelerator of change, or do you think that, or how are you handling with these types of external shocks? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this question. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, when you saw the slide about 14 megatrends, that some of them COVID accelerated, some of them there is no change. Basically, we identified that the evolution COVID had either no influence or even decelerate the importance. Concerning the sudden shocks, this is exactly what I said, that this horizon scanning capacity. Because, of course, some 3-4 months ago, we got the question how it comes that you foresighters, you didn't get any information and you didn't tell us anything about the energy crisis. And it was also sudden change which has happened, and nobody was predicting, nobody was expecting. And of course, if it continues, it can, of course, in very important way influence, and also eruption of volcanoes and all these things. So these are the things which we consider that are very important, and this is the reason why we want to introduce horizon scanning as important element in the foresight work, which is horizon scanning as such is not foresight as such, but is as a new input to the work that, well, it's necessary to keep into consideration what is happening nowadays. So horizon scanning, and you said that you are national expert in RTD. Maybe I should just mention that foresight is not only work for JRC, but we established the work of foresight network inside the Commission. So each DG is part of it. RTD is very important because foresight is in particular research work, but we also established the foresight network between the member states. We have even a ministerial network of ministers, as Vice President Šefčovič likes to say, that these are ministers for future, that people who takes into consideration. So we want to bring more these, let's say, unexpected shocks and those inputs which are changing our life suddenly. So not something like demographic change, which continues and will continue, but something which is sudden.
Thank you. We are reaching the end of the appointment. We still have 2 minutes. I don't know if anyone has a last question. Otherwise, I will take the privilege to make it. If you have a question, just write your name. I will give you the possibility into the next 10 seconds. Then I will do my question myself. I don't see the number increase, so probably people are satisfied with what they heard. I would like just to have a look to the future. Basically, we are living the twin transition, and you anticipated that the next Foresight report is focused on this. However, I have to say that despite the initial ambition of Europe about digital technologies and the willingness of Europe to lead in artificial intelligence, for example, this was one of the main target objectives when Europe started thinking about the digital strategy. At the moment, as you already highlighted, AI, big data, and robotics, we are at the same pace of Japan, but a bit lagging behind mostly USA and China. So is this Foresight report trying to suggest solutions, possible approaches to recover the gap and to become leaders as is European ambition? What do you think?
Massimo, thanks for this question. I will tell you in a year's time.
That's a very good
question. Because, you know, we identified that this is really those new technologies, those areas in digital and greening. This really will be a game changer. because we have chosen as something as extremely important greening. We are no doubt world leader in this. We are setting the standards in this. So industry worldwide will be adjusted to standards and way what we are indicating, what we are putting and showing that what is the future. At the same time, in digital area, it's clear that we are not always setting the directions because we are in majority of things lagging behind. But we are aware of this. So we want to take measures, we want to do any kind of support in order to create conditions so that also artificial intelligence, also production of this, let's say, not only equipment, but also software and everything what is needed will be not only in Asia and California, but also in Europe. And we need to hope that as I mentioned, this company, which is now establishing the first headquarters and should be in Paris, that it will be more companies which will recognize that it makes sense to be in Europe, and we will create the conditions for these companies, create conditions. I don't mean only through state aid, but in particular the framework, regulatory framework conditions, so that we will be able to compete also for the future.
Excellent. So we are going to invite you again in 1 year time to have the answer.
I was not chasing for getting the invitation.
I'm taking the chance.
Thank you very much.
So this closes the 1 hour with Europe appointment this time. I hope you enjoyed the meeting and the talk. Just to remind you that everything will be also put online for you to follow it afterwards if you want to revise the appointment, and we look forward to meet you all at the next appointment with us probably in January. Meanwhile, wishing you a good day and a good week.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.